absolute value equations and inequalities. So we're going to start by learning how to solve absolute value equations, and then we're going to look at solving inequalities. So the first thing here, it's important to know that to solve an equation of the form the absolute value of A equals B, you must solve the positive case A equals B, or you can solve the case where you have positive A equals negative B. Either of these cases works just fine, and since we're using an absolute value, we know that the result will always be positive, so that is why we can solve for both cases. So our first example here, we have the absolute value of n minus 5 equals negative 2. So to solve an absolute value equation, we essentially do the same thing that we do when solving any equation, except this time we start by trying to isolate our absolute value. So let's start by adding 5 to both sides. That leaves us with the absolute value of n equals positive 3. So just like above, our solution would be n equals 3 or n equals negative 3. Because either way, the absolute value sign would make both of these solutions positive. All right, so the steps, just like I said, we have to isolate the absolute value and then secondly, we have to make two equations and solve. These two equations account for both the positive and negative case. So let's look at a couple of examples on how this looks. So for the absolute value of b equals 3, very similar to our first example here. We just have b equals 3 or b equals negative 3. Because in this case, the absolute value would make both of our solutions positive. In our second example here, we have the absolute value of x minus 5 equals 6. Obviously, our absolute value is already isolated here. So let's make two equations. Our first equation would be absolute value. Well, actually, no, we're going to drop our absolute value symbols. That's why we're making our two equations. So we have x minus 5 equals positive 6, which is what we initially have. And then our second equation, we have x minus 5 equals negative 6. So let's go ahead and solve both of these equations separately. So to solve our left equation, we would have to add 5 to both sides. And that would give us x equals 11. And on the right equation, same thing. Add 5 to both sides. But this time, we have x equals negative 1. Okay, so when writing our solutions, we would have x equals 11 or x equals negative 1. Okay, one or the other can be our solution. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the absolute value of x plus 7 equals 2x. Same thing here, our absolute value is already isolated. So let's go ahead and write our two equations. So we have x plus 7 equals 2x, which is what we start with. And then we also have the negative case, where x plus 7 would equal negative 2x. Okay, in both of these cases, we need to get both of our x's onto the same side. Since we have our 7, our constant, on the left side of our equation, we might as well subtract our single x to get all of our variables on the right side of our equation. So that leaves us with 7 equals x. That's our solution. And on the other side, we have 7 equals negative 3x. Okay, so our left side is solved, yet we need to solve our right side. Let's divide by -3, and that will leave us with x equals -7/3, which we can just leave that in fraction form. Okay, so right there we have both of our solutions. Okay, with the next example here, we have to start by isolating our absolute value. So let's add 5 to both sides. And that leaves us with the absolute value of 3x minus 6 equals -2. So the first thing here is we should be alarmed since the value outside of our absolute value is negative. So that's telling us that our absolute value is going to result in a negative number. This isn't good. This isn't possible. So this is one of those cases that you would have no solution. Okay? Remember, anytime you have an absolute value, you need to get a positive solution. Okay? So continuing, we have a couple more examples. Let's see what's on page 2 here. We have just special cases. So let's do our first example here. Then we'll save the other two for the start of class, and we'll call it there. So we have 6 times the absolute value of x equals 24. So just like any time we are multiplying by a variable, we must start by dividing 6 from both sides to undo our operation. That would leave us with the absolute value of x equals 4. So remember, we have to have our positive and negative case. That would leave us with x equals 4 or x equals -4. Okay? Like I said, we're going to leave the rest of the examples for class to give us something to start with. Try both of these on your own. You guys know all of the skills that you would need to be able to solve the rest of these problems. So give them a try on your own, and we'll take a look at them at the start of class. Thanks for watching.